Let's make sure that we don't have bosses who suck. And how do we do that? You identify people in your company that aren't the leaders you want them to be. You've got to either make them better leaders or you've got to replace them with better leaders. And you can't be afraid to do that.
You're listening to HR Superstars, a podcast brought to you by 15Five. On this show, we talk to strategic people leaders who are making a meaningful impact in their organizations and shaping the future of work. So get ready to be inspired and discover the secrets behind building high-performing teams and fostering a culture of growth and thriving. The future of HR starts here. Hello and welcome to the HR Superstars podcast. I'm your host, Karina Young, and we're here to connect with the world's leading innovators in the HR and people space who want to get real with us by sharing their life stories, actionable insights, and practical advice to help all of us get better in our craft and make an impact through our work. Our episode today is all about trends, what is on the horizon for people and culture functions in 2025. Now, even I can admit that it's hard to stay on top of all the posts and reports that we see coming our way. How do we know what actually matters? Who do we trust to help us cut through the noise and get to the insights that are actually going to drive improvements in performance, engagement, retention, the things that we all really care about? But that's why you're here with me. And that's why I have invited an incredible guest with real expertise in this area that's actually going to help us be proactive in our strategy and program planning. So today I'm welcoming David Hawthorne, Chief People Officer for Anchor Point Management Group, a franchisees group exceeding $900 million in revenue and employing more than 12,000 people across the U.S. In his 20 years with Anchor Point, David's grown with the company from an HR manager into his current role, where he's leading all key areas for human resources, benefits, payroll, risk management. And if that weren't enough, David seems like a pretty chill guy outside of work too. We hear he's a huge fan of baseball, Harleys, whiskey, martial arts memorabilia. So visiting his office sounds maybe more like a place you meet for happy hour than a performance plan. And that right there makes him a superstar. So David, welcome to the podcast. I would love to hear just a quick story of what's your journey been like in HR. And if you're feeling vulnerable, do you have a favorite menu item from one of your franchisees in the Anchor Point group?
I have lots of favorite menu items, so I'll be happy to share those. And Karina, thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it. I think most people in HR will tell you they didn't grow up saying, I want to be in HR. We sort of land in it. And that's kind of where I was. I actually started my college career as a physics major, converted to an English major before I wound up eventually getting a business degree and working in a Taco Bell restaurant after college and really where I learned management. Worked for several years for Taco Bell Corporation in Atlanta, Georgia. Worked my way up into multi-unit management and, from there launched into recruiting. Which I think is how a lot of HR folks wind up in HR is through the recruiting side. And did that for several years and then really kind of became an HR generalist. By 2002, I had experience as an HR generalist in a couple of different industries. But most of my experience was in the restaurant field. And in 2002, I joined Pacific Bells, who was at the time one of the top 12 largest franchisees of Taco Bell. I've been with Pacific Bells, now Anchor Point Management Group, for 23 years this year, having grown from an HR manager with them in Ohio to, running the HR team now across the country. And we've grown from not only having Taco Bell franchise, where we're the third largest franchise in the system now, with almost 300 units, but we also are the second largest Buffalo Wild Wings franchise in the system. We're the largest European Wax Center franchise in their system. We've just become a franchisee for 7 Brew coffee stands, where we've opened up, 15 coffee stands in the last 15 months, in Ohio and soon to come to Georgia and other places, as well as some other businesses that we operate in the Northwest. We own a brewery, we have a construction company, we have all kinds of things that we kind of dabble in, on the side there, but those are our core businesses.
That's incredible. That's probably no stretch then to say that you're pretty busy. There's a lot going on.
It's never boring, and no 2 days are ever alike. So
I love that. Well, tell me a little bit about your role in this recent HR trends report that just came out from McLean & Company. How did you get involved in that, and why is that an area that's important for you?
We've worked with McLean now for, 4 or 5 years. They've helped us with engagement surveys, with HR team development, and some other learning and development issues that we've tackled as a company. So really feel good about the work that they do on the research side as well. And this year was asked to participate in the HR trends research and really kind of determine what are we seeing on the horizon for HR? Where have we been? Where are we going? And I think this year was sort of monumental in that, for the first time in several years in the HR Trends report, the trends have flipped and we're seeing different things now that are much more important in the HR field than the hiring and recruiting that we commonly see.
Yeah, well, let's talk about that flip because it seems like one of the biggest shifts that's happening right now is this move away from HR just being a hiring function to really being a place responsible for leadership development and retention. What do you see as driving that big change, and what does that really mean for people functions?
I think a lot of this really kind of started with COVID. If you go back and you look at all the things that happened with COVID, no matter what industry you were in, you were impacted by what happened in, 2020, 2021. And for us, especially, in the restaurant fields, restaurant employees were considered frontline employees. They were essential. Most restaurants were open in some capacity, which included us and our thousands of employees across the country. I think it woke everybody up on the HR side to the challenges and the consequences of decisions that we made during that time. And I think hiring stayed pretty big focus for the HR team, just because so many people left the restaurant industry, so many people left the workforce. I think I read somewhere in 21 and 22, there was the largest number of new businesses started by entrepreneurs ever. And so, I think hiring and staffing kind of continued on as a very important topic for everybody. But I think the market's change. I think, between, the economic changes that have happened, at a macro level, the unemployment rate that has fluctuated significantly from, very high during COVID to now much, much lower. And I think it really woke a lot of folks up to the fact that, this isn't really just a hiring game. This isn't just how many people can I get in the door to fill open roles. It's really about how do I select the right people? And more importantly, how do I keep them? I don't have to get into a hiring game if I'm keeping really good talent that I found out there. So we've really kind of migrated. I think we see it with a lot of other people that we talk to, migrated away from how do I fill this position to how do I keep this position filled? And I think that's been a key change for the HR field.
Yeah, well, really keeping that focus much more internal, right? Yeah, the people you have, how are you developing them? So for HR leaders, how do you see that changing the dynamic that they have with their peers, with other executives in the organization? What are things that are maybe being expected of them now that wasn't front of their responsibilities before?
Really for us, and I've worked with my executive team now for several years. A lot of us have a lot of tenure with this company. We've worked together for a while. And so for me, I think it's been an easy transition to be able to say, hey, how can we help? What do you need to see, from your team, from your leaders? I think it's also important, for me and for my success with Anchor Point, it's really been knowing the business and understanding the business. And I think that's a big change for a lot of HR leaders. Before it was, are you an expert in HR? And now it's, are you an expert in HR, but do you also understand the restaurant industry and the franchise business and what it takes to be successful in that business? And then how can you translate that into how can I help my franchise partners be successful in the operation of their business through the people that we employ, train, develop, bench plan for, et cetera?
Was there a certain moment in your career journey that you made that switch and that flip from just being an expert, just being good at the, general HR functions to really thinking about the business in a different way?
Again, I think for me, it was a little bit easier. I got out of college and started working in restaurants, and I ran restaurants. I was responsible for food costs and for labor, and, for serving customers and, and the amount of time that Taco Bell wants you to serve customers in, and all those things. So really, I sort of came in understanding the business. I've had to learn a lot more about the business, at a much larger level than running a single unit or a handful of units. We're operating almost 300 Taco Bells. What does it take to keep those going? What does it take to build more, to buy more? And how do we do that? So I think there's still parts of the business that I'm still learning today when it comes to that. I think that's what a really good HR leader has to be open to. Is, hey, I can't just be an expert in California labor law or, retention practices. I've got to be an expert too. And how does my company make money? And how can I leverage the people in this company to help our company make more money and to be more successful and to grow more?
What have you seen, or what do you think is the biggest blocker for HR leaders to make that shift? What's been hard for them, and what's advice you would give people who are trying to be better, trying to drive more of a business impact?
It's interesting. I've had to fill, HR positions within our team as we have turnover on our team, just like everybody has turnover. And it's really interesting to see the resumes and the skill sets that come in. And I see a lot of HR folks that really, what I call bounce from not job to job, but industry to industry. And, I think about how easy it is for me, if you will, to navigate the restaurant industry and some of the retail industry that we're in, because I'm used to it and I've been there. If you pick me up and plop me down into a healthcare setting, it would take a while for me to get, up to speed and understand, because I don't have the knowledge around the healthcare industry that I do around the restaurant retail industry. And I think a lot of times as I've talked to, younger HR people on our team and where they want to be, hey, it's not only about finding the HR career that you enjoy, find the industry that you love. And how do you become an expert in that industry and kind of stay there and grow with it and show that you can make a difference?
That's such interesting advice that I don't think anyone in HR gets, partially because we don't grow up dreaming about a career in HR and we end up falling in there, but no one ever really sits us down to make that connection. I was having a conversation with someone yesterday around this similar thing, and they were asking me about, why I haven't moved into other industries. I was like, well, I know tech, I know software, I know what this world is like. I know a lot of the cultures and nuances, but also how do we operate? What are all the things that it takes to be successful? So to your point, if I go somewhere else doesn't mean I couldn't be successful. I now just have a little bit steeper of a hill to climb. And
Right.
unless you're ready to do that, right, you're excited about that kind of opportunity, that's one thing, but it's hard to really be deep in something if you move industry to industry. And I think even just putting that as a point of importance for people, like pick an industry, pick something you are excited about. HR is different, whether it's the food industry, if it's tech, if you're in a totally different field, manufacturing. I mean, all those have their own, I think, really unique things that speak to us and who we are and what we're passionate about. So I love that you give that advice to your people or even have those conversations. That's so unique. So let's talk a little bit about leadership development in general. This seems to be just a big priority for people functions, even in lots of trends and reports I'm seeing. I mean, even for us at 15.5, we think about leadership development, what that means for us this year. What do you think a great internal leadership development program looks like? What are things that have made a difference and made an impact for you?
I think the most effective leadership development program is in a company is when all the leaders are involved in leadership development. I think it's very easy for, I'm just going to pick a title, right? It's very easy for a director of operations at a facility to say, hey, HR, build me a leadership development program and run some classes for me and build the curriculum and do those things. And at the end of the day, it's not the HR team that's driving culture in the company or driving that leadership development. It's every single leader that somebody works with. I'm going to have a much lower impact on an employee who works for that director of operations, and that director of operations himself or herself is going to have on that employee. And I think it's critical that leaders recognize that. You're the best person that can develop your team. So when we get into leadership development, it's as much about what tools and resources are available to you to help you develop your team? How can we assist in that process and enhance that process? But more importantly, how do we prepare you to be able to develop the leaders on your own team?
How do you think about his program differentiation with your more senior leaders in the company, your frontline managers? Are there ways that you've designed programs to kind of target different needs of different groups?
There are. I think you've got different needs at the leadership level for those groups. I mean, frontline managers, and for us, those are, general managers in our restaurants. They have very different needs than, a multi-unit manager who maybe has 30 Taco Bells that they're overseeing. That manager is that multi-unit manager is trying to influence several people to achieve corporate goals and those sorts of things. The frontline manager, hey, I've got to get these tacos out this window in 2.5 minutes to hit the metrics we need and to make our guests happy, right? And so there's an urgency at the frontline management level that you don't necessarily have at the multi-unit management level. And so how do you train differently for that? How do you, especially at the frontline manager level, how do you teach those managers to work better under stress? Because they're always being watched, right? Everything they do, there's an employee who's noticing how they're doing it, right? So how do you teach them to deal with the stress, to handle the urgency, and then to spend the time they need with their teams to do those things? And those are different skill sets that you're teaching at that level than you're teaching a director of operations who, hey, how do you influence somebody when you only see them once a month as you're visiting restaurants, versus a frontline manager who sees their people every day. And so again, different skill sets. And I think you've got to really recognize what those skill sets are, how to teach those, and when to teach those. As we're preparing general managers to move into the multi-unit manager role, that's the biggest gap that we have to bridge is, hey, it's not always urgent and you got to fix it and you got to fix it yourself. You've got to influence multiple frontline managers to make these changes. And how do you do that? It's different curriculum. It's a different skill set that you're looking for. And it's a different way to mentor people to that level that you need them at for the position you're looking at.
Oh, certainly. Well, and outside of influence, this group that's moving from being frontline to moving up a little bit more, it's like your future executives, the people who might be bigger in operations and move up. Outside of influence, what are other skill gaps that you find you're directing your training at or that you're trying to close for that group?
In some ways, again, when you look at that frontline manager, it may be, how am I going to run this shift today so that everything happens well? They'll graduate as a general manager to, how do I set up my week so that the whole week runs well, or maybe the month, but that's their planning horizon. When you're at the multi-unit level or at the director of operations level or at an executive level, your planning horizon goes way out. And so how do you accommodate that? How do you learn, hey, I've got frontline managers who are trying to make the shift happen today, but yet here's a metric that I've got to impact over the next 6 months for me to be approved for growth next year, for me to hit my budget for the year, whatever those things are, and how you weave those together. And so really being able to teach managers as they move up the chain, if you will, how do you teach them to expand their planning horizon? It's not just what's happening today or this week. It may not even be what's happening this year yet. I mean, at the executive level, you're doing 3 and 5 year plans, and how are you going to get there? But when you're planning at that level too, especially as a company like ours that grows like we do, you're constantly revising those plans. And so how do you do that as well? Those are the skill sets I think that are most important for people moving up, is to understand as your role gets larger, it's not just more people that you have to manage and more activities that you have to manage. It's more time that you have to manage. It's that bigger planning horizon you've got to get after.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting thinking about your journey with Anchor Point too, being there for 23 years, growing in your career. Did you have someone in the company that was a great mentor, a great resource to you as you started to develop those skills and move into really being an executive leader?
I really did. I really had more than one person. And I think that, again, leveraging several people and the strengths that they have or the opportunities that they show that you can learn from is very critical. I certainly had a boss as a VP of HR who helped me significantly with looking at, the business and how do we plan further out? How do the decisions that we make today that may fix today's problem, what problems do they create 6 months from now that we haven't thought about yet? And how do you switch on that level of thinking? Then even our CEO, our CEO is our founder. He started all these businesses at some point or another, and watching him, learning from him, the things that he does, how he thinks about things, how he plans things, those have been critical pieces for me as well in my success.
I love that. Well, and a lot of what you're talking about too, of this journey and influence and managing more time than tactics, right, is a lot of what I think we think about too as HR leaders are becoming more strategic. Not just, did I file this compliance report? Did I get payroll out on time? Am I doing the onboarding task well? But what are we doing holistically in the long term that improves, right, performance, engagement, retention, even things like leadership development, right? There's a short-term horizon. Some of these programs we're going to run now, but what we're really hoping for are these bigger behavior changes, bigger changes in leadership development that we've got to try to map out over bigger periods of time. And it can feel intimidating, I think, for a lot of folks in HR who don't maybe necessarily have that mentor, or they're a small team of 1, 2, 3 and are doing it for themselves the first time. What would you recommend for people like that who aren't in as big of an organization, but trying to get there? Where could they go to help learn some of those skills?
Oh gosh, network. SHRM is, a big one that everybody talks about. And there are lots of pros and cons to SHRM. The local SHRM chapters to me are the more influential of the group. Nearly every major city has a local SHRM chapter. Look them up, find one close to you, get involved, join HR groups on LinkedIn. Other social media channels that you may be. I'm not on a lot. I'm on LinkedIn, but that's about it. But find those people that you can talk to and network with. And don't be afraid to, when you go to conferences or you go to meetings, and do make yourself go to those things. Meet people, pass out business cards, share QR codes for your LinkedIn profile, and connect and chat and have somebody to sound off with, right? I have problems that come up all the time that we've never dealt with before. I've been in my role for 10 years now, but I tell everybody, when I became a chief people officer, I'd never been a chief people officer before. So how do you figure out how to do that? Well, some of it is, what do I know and how do I leverage what I've already learned? And who do I go talk to and how do I figure this out? And I was not afraid to reach out to another chief people officer at another company and say, hey, have you ever had this happen? What have you done about it? But then I have to determine, is that good advice or not? And how do I run with it? But again, if your network's big enough, you're able to talk to people and kind of figure that out.
Two important things in there, right, is one, not being afraid to reach out and ask. I think so many more people are willing to help and give advice and share their experience and people realize. And then also using your good judgment of, is that right for me and my company? Is there a little bit in here I can take? Can I take all of it? Or does that just not relevant? That's sometimes that tricky part.
HR has changed from support function to strategic powerhouse, but traditional HR software hasn't caught up. 15Five's performance management platform helps your HR team discover where to take action and make a business impact. Find out how to maximize employee performance, engagement, and retention at 15five.com or click the link in the show notes.
Coming back to trends, let's talk about retention, because I think for a lot of organizations, hiring is on the slower side, right? We see outside what's happening economically. There are places that are still, reducing their workforce. Talk a little bit about retention being a priority, and what are things that you see great HR leaders do to keep their employees retained and engaged in their company?
I think the first thing is select the right people to begin with. I think it's very easy for managers, especially frontline managers. They're in a hurry. They have a sense of urgency. The restaurants were kind of infamous for it. Hey, if you fog a mirror, we're happy to have you come on board because I just need a body in here to do something, right? And so we really work hard with our managers to say, you're better off being short-staffed than you are hiring the wrong person, because the wrong person can just devastate your culture and really hurt your team. And you don't want that. So make the right selection. Now, every company is going to determine what's the right selection criteria for them to use to say, these are people that are going to be successful with my company. We've been around a long time. We think we know what it takes to be successful here, and we try to hire for that profile to get those folks in. But that's first and foremost, hire the right people. If you've hired the right people, it's much easier to keep them in the long term. Then just from a retention perspective, we go back to that leadership development piece. One of the first reasons somebody's going to leave a company is because their boss sucks. So let's make sure that we don't have bosses who suck. And how do we do that? You identify people in your company that aren't the leaders you want them to be. You've got to either make them better leaders or you've got to replace them with better leaders. And you can't be afraid to do that. My boss reminds me, when I sort of interviewed for this chief people officer job, and one of the things I told him was, I don't think we fire enough people, because there are people that don't need to be working for our company. They don't need to be on our team. And so how do we fix that? How do we get them to a place where they deserve and have earned a spot on the team? Or how do we find somebody else that can come in and be a better teammate to our people? So I think that's important too, from a retention perspective, is let's make sure we've got great leaders in there so that people want to work for them. And then they're developing them. They're talking to them about their career aspirations and helping them get there. And I think that goes a long way toward keeping people engaged and helping people grow within the company. We have a very formal bench planning or succession planning process that starts at the team member level in our restaurants and goes all the way up to the executive level. So at any given time, I know how many people are promotable in our company, what it's going to take to get them promoted to the next level. If I promote somebody because I've got an opening at director of operations, who's that person's backfill? I know that answer, which sometimes means I don't have a backfill for them because we haven't done the things we need to do on a leadership development level. So again, identifying those gaps and attacking those just makes a big difference. And when people begin to see, we publicly send out announcements through email, through our chat groups, et cetera, every time somebody gets promoted, just to remind people, we're constantly looking for people to move up. 79% of our managers, last I checked, were promoted from within in our restaurants. So, just a phenomenal statistic. And those are the kind of things that really drive people to say, hey, this is the kind of company I want to work for. In the 23 years I've been with the company, we've grown tenfold. And that's unheard of across a lot of industries. So, there's always opportunity for people, and I've seen it firsthand, and happy to share those experiences so people understand, hey, find a home and grow there. And that's where we want to be, is that home for people.
I love that. And I think it's such an important reminder too, that when you actually are not afraid, like coming back to not having the fear to take the action, be able to hold people accountable for their job, move on if they're not right, what that does for your people who are already highly engaged, high performing. I saw some video, and I'm going to completely botch the statistic, but it was something like, when someone sits next to a high performer, their chances of their performance increasing is like 25%. When someone sits next to a low performer, their chances of decreasing their performance are 50%. It is that person who might be bringing your team down, whether it's culture, behavior, skill, whatever it is, actually has such a deeper effect than we give it credit for. And I wish people understood that metric-driven value of like, don't just say, we'll wait another week, we'll push this out another month, oh, maybe this will change, maybe it won't. If and it's not the right fit, you've got to do something about it, because your high performers, high engaged people are waiting, and they know, even if they're not saying it, they are waiting and looking. And I love that you have built that into what you do and your processes, and are really seeing that impact within your company and culture.
Yeah. It's definitely part of the culture. People see it. If you reward bad behavior by keeping them in position or promoting them, everybody sees that. And, every time you reward somebody who has bad behavior, you're losing somebody who has good behavior, because they don't want to put up with that. They don't want to work for a company that does that. So don't put yourself in that position. That's our goal.
Yeah. Well, and it even just comes back to that flip in the mindset of, what am I doing that's right for this business? If I know the outcomes of my business, what we're trying to do is me not firing someone when I need to. How does that leading to a worse outcome, right? Being able to start to have that story intrinsically in your mind makes it much easier, I think, to move toward the right decision and action. Then you don't see the bigger picture, and it feels very personal, one-on-one. And it can be hard to move past that piece. But I think that's so cool that you have that internal growth, obviously within your story, and then for tons of people in your organization. I think just also creates a cool moment for those people who come in as, the person who's at the cash register at Taco Bell and thinking about, what do they want to do? Where do they want to be and grow? They actually have line of sight into other people who are doing it and being that model for them.
If you look at our 4 major brands that we operate, each one of the presidents of those brands started out as a team member. It's amazing to think about, and people don't realize that, and I made this joke to others before, it drives me nuts when I hear people make jokes about, oh, you go get a degree, or you're going to be saying, do you want fries with that for the rest of your life? Well, the general managers who work at McDonald's and serve fries are making good money. Our general managers at Taco Bell make good money. And people work into those roles and do that. And we have presidents of our brands who started in those roles and do that. So, it's an incredible industry to be a part of. And there's a lot to learn about running multi-million-dollar businesses and running restaurants.
Let's talk a little bit about AI. In a company of your size, or where it's not just everyone at a corporate office too, you have all these restaurants and businesses. Where do you see AI playing a role in HR and for your employees? And what are some of the ways that you've actually brought that to life in Anchor Point?
AI is, I think we're still learning what it can do, how good or bad it is at certain things, right? I mean, we all know, AI hallucinates sometimes. So you can't always listen to everything that it says, but we've leveraged it in the HR department. Really, primarily at this point, it's more of a brainstorming tool. Hey, how do I tackle this? Here's the situation, or I need to build a leadership development class to help people understand conflict resolution and how to de-escalate situations and those sorts of things. And it's amazing the resources that AI taps into to be able to say, have you thought about these things? And it's really kind of helped broaden our vision on what's available out there from a resource perspective. When we're building development plans for individuals, AI is a great place to start. Hey, I have an individual that, needs to learn how to do X, Y, and Z. What are the best resources for doing that? And get some really creative things that, hey, even we didn't think of, so, hey, I love that. From the HR perspective, I'm also a little scared of AI. Obviously, anything that you put in AI in a prompt becomes part of the public domain. So we have to be very careful from an HR perspective that we don't have confidential or identifiable information that's going into those prompts to fill that out. So, it feels limiting in some degrees. I think as more private AI databases come online, as more people are able to leverage that technology across private databases, I think it'll be easier for us to leverage those sorts of things in AI. Operationally across the company, lots of departments are using AI for lots of different things, whether it's data analytics. We're testing in restaurants now, AI order takers at the drive-thru. Even in early stage tests, they're 85 to 90% accurate, which sometimes beats what the humans, order takers are doing at the drive-thru. So, it's incredible how those sorts of things are leveraging things as well. And so how do we take advantage of that? So I think we're early in our process. One of the things that the restaurant industry is probably not the best at is being on the cutting edge of technology. I think some companies do better than others. I think we do a pretty good job with technology. And so we're getting out there and trying things and playing with it and seeing what we can learn. But I think we're a long way from really knowing what the full impact's going to be yet.
Yeah. And sometimes it's just better to just be out there and try it than feel like you have to be the expert in it, right? Because there's so much with AI that there's still room for more deeply understanding, to your point, what the impact is going to be. But there are these little ways that just help what used to be busy work move a lot faster, right? I mean, I was using AI this morning. I was putting some slides together and I was like, why am I hitting writer's block about the definition of this leadership group? Like, I just ask AI for it, and then I can refine it. Sometimes you just need that little starting point to keep you moving, but not feel like you've got to do everything all on your own when there's so much out there. Do you think that there is space for AI to be predictive with HR or to help with kind of looking at future turnover, retention, early intervention strategies?
It's already out there. A lot of the major HCM platforms are already leveraging AI to be able to do that predictive analytics on your population. Hey, we think this person's at risk because, they've got a 45-minute commute and their manager has higher turnover than other managers, in that department. Those sorts of things that it kind of pieces together and says, hey, maybe you want to touch base with this person and kind of see where they're at. So, I think that's going to become more popular. I think it's going to become easier to do those kind of data analytics on your population than having to go out and pay for some of the large HCM platforms that do it. So I do think it's coming. And I do think, again, and for smaller companies, in a lot of cases, it may just be worth a prompt in AI just to kind of say, hey, here's my population of people. Here's what they're nurses or they're truck drivers or they're fast food workers, whatever they may be. And these are the circumstances. What are the biggest predictors of turnover for this group? And really try to understand that. So I think there's enough knowledge out there that AI can kind of glean that from what's out there and be able to tell you, here's things you can look at.
Yeah, which is interesting because coming back to what you're saying about, right, your leadership development and empowering your leaders to have that care and that drive to build their teams, right, build the skills. if you can give your managers these kind of insights and have them check it regularly, right? Like you're not the one who's going in and saying, okay, within this group at this restaurant or within this team here, what's happening? If managers have access to that and you've already trained them on why it matters, now they get to go in and do all of that on their own. And you're right, helping, supporting, assisting, but you don't have to lead the charge on everything because we can't. Right. We can't do that. Right. We're too far from everything. Each individual situation. We just can't. Yeah. In case nobody knew, HR can't do everything. Although it certainly seems like it's added to our task list. But I think that's one of the ways I get most excited about predictive AI and those data and insights is if I can get my managers to start to care about those things, can I have really good quality data from my HRIS, wherever it is? Do I have enough demographics, enough recent information from whether it's surveys or different performance things we've run that they can start to find those right groups that matter? Right now, suddenly in engineering, we know people who live X miles from the office are 10% less engaged. Okay, like let's go do something now that actually matters to that group versus trying to make a fix for people that actually doesn't hit their need. That's too much of a blanket approach.
One of the things too that, we're not there because we're not leveraging AI as much as, maybe somebody that's more on the cutting edge is going to do that. And so one of the things that we really do at my level is harder for me to know who's at risk in the company because there's 13,000 employees out there. I have no idea. But frontline managers should know. And one of the tools that we leverage to do that is, we want all of our managers to have one-on-ones with all their employees on a regular basis. 10 to 15-minute conversation, hey, what's important right now? What's happening right now? Where do you see yourself in the next month, 6 months, year? How can I help you get there? Those 3 questions alone in a 10-minute conversation with your employees once a month, every 2 weeks, whatever that cadence is, those are important. And those give you direct insight onto how engaged somebody is. Boy, when I talked to them 2 weeks ago, they felt a lot better. Today, this conversation doesn't feel good. Let me dig into that and let me find out more. So, I think AI will be helpful for people at the executive or middle management levels to have a bigger finger on the pulse of what's happening across the company. But it's those frontline managers, those direct supervisors that really should be having those conversations face to face, eyeball to eyeball, to be able to say, how are you doing? How can I help you? What roadblocks are in your way that I can remove for you so that you can be better?
Exactly. Yeah. AI can in no way be a replacement for that human interaction. And one-on-ones do not have to be overly complicated. To your point, if you just ask a very simple 3 questions, but you do it on a consistent basis, you will get far more insight into what your team is actually feeling than doing it 1 or 2 times a year with some maybe template that you pulled from HR and you're like, I don't really know what any of this means. Like find whatever that is that feels authentic to you and just do it and just repeat it over and over and over again.
Yeah. And the other benefit is having those regular conversations. When your employees are used to talking to you, they'll come talk to you. It's amazing how that works. And so when something comes up and boy, we don't have a one-on-one schedule, but I need to chat with you. Those are great conversations because, hey, they've approached you and they've said, I want to talk. I've got something on my mind and I trust you. And I trust your judgment and I want to talk to you. That goes a long way towards building that retention and having that person long-term.
Exactly. Yeah. Right. Talked about like predictive insights. Like what AI cannot tackle is just that feeling of trust and vulnerability that you want to have with your manager to say, I'm having a terrible day or this thing happened. Here's what I'm thinking about. I heard this person got promoted. Why not me? Like those are those internal thoughts and feelings we can't track in technology and we can't always read. You have to build a relationship. It'll always, always be valuable, especially when you're in high stress, high pressure situations, like working in a restaurant, like there's a lot that we ask people to control who are in customer facing jobs. And I think you need to have a manager where you can go and let a little bit of that out and be open and talk about what's really on your mind.
Exactly.
So let's talk about kind of future proofing for HR leaders, right? We know what some of these trends are for 2025, places we need to focus around leadership development, retention, how we think about AI and technology. Are there any other new skills that HR leaders can be building or deepening that you think will be good for them in that kind of future timeline, the next 2, 3, 4 years?
I think I will go back to what I said earlier about just knowing your industry and knowing your business. You'd be a smart business person, will make you a much better HR partner. And then also being willing to ask the hard questions. Go into, so I've got 4 brand presidents I have to deal with. At least once a quarter, I'm in front of them and saying, how are we doing? What can we be doing better? How are we supporting you, or how are we not supporting you? What are we doing that we should stop doing? What should we be doing that we're not doing? And be ready for whatever those answers are. And then how do you pivot and make those things happen? You can't be all things to all people, but at least find out where the gaps are. How can I be a better partner to you and help you grow your business? Is a fantastic question to be asking, and don't be afraid of the answer.
Yeah. And what do you think the biggest risk is to HR leaders, to their reputation, their actual impact, if they don't do those things? If they wait another 2 to 3 years to even start thinking about doing that?
I know lots of folks who've been in HR for decades who are still focused on recruiting. And if that's what you love, and if that's what you want to do, that's fantastic. But there's so much to HR. I dearly love being the generalist that I am in HR. I get to touch so many different aspects of this field and the people that do those different parts of the field. But I love that. And I don't want to be relegated to, hey, recruiting's tough because unemployment's low and, now HR is important. I don't want to be that person. I want to always be important, because even if unemployment's low and recruiting's not that tough right now, how am I helping them on the leadership development side? How am I helping them mitigate risk management? How am I helping on total comp and rewards to ensure that we're keeping the people that we need to keep? Those are all the pieces I want to be able to leverage, and I want to be important all the time. I don't want to just be important when it's hard to hire people. And so I think the risk that you run by not being out there and being in front of those things is you're going to get relegated to be, oh, we need HR now because it's hard to staff.
I love that. We've got to put always be important on like a banner for HR leaders, for HR teams. I think that's incredible. Is there any last bits of advice or inspiration you would give to someone who's listening to this, thinking about all these things and just is going to do one thing differently tomorrow?
Learn something new every day and recognize that you are learning something new every day. I think it's very difficult. I've seen this on LinkedIn. It's been trending lately. There's no HR for HR. You are HR. You know what needs to happen. Go figure it out, right? I mean, look, we truly are self-sufficient. Let's be that way, right? Let's understand that I'm learning something new every day, and how do I leverage what I've learned today, tomorrow, and keep doing that. So I would just continue to tell people, keep learning, know that you're learning, and keep, leveraging that new knowledge into something better the next day.
I love it. That's actually been one of my mottos for 2025 for people, is just do the damn thing. Like, don't talk about it. Don't make an excuse why you can't do it. Don't tell me what's blocking you. Just do it. There is a way.
Figure it out.
Guaranteed.
Let's figure it out.
Yeah, exactly.
So somebody's out there doing it. It may as well be us.
I couldn't have ended that on a better note. David, thank you so much for your time and your insights. This conversation has been so meaningful to really more deeply understand how you're bringing these trends to life within Anchor Point, but also just what you're seeing and what things that people function can do better. So really glad to have you on here today. Thank you so much, and appreciate you sharing with our community.
Karina, thank you. Appreciate it. Had a great conversation. Really loved it.
As an HR leader, you have a critical role in managing an organization's most valuable asset, its people. However, despite the importance of your role, other executives may not see the value of having HR leaders at the executive table. This is why we crafted the HR Outcomes Playbook. It's designed to help you close that gap and operate in a way that enlightens and excites the rest of the executive team and shows them that HR can provide value to an organization's bottom line. Get your copy at the link in the show notes now.